All right. For our next patient, we have a 74-year-old man who is another experienced hearing aid user. He was on his second pair of RIC hearing aids by the time I saw him. Initially, he was fit with a pair of Signia RICs that, no surprise, Reeler was never done on them. Interestingly, through looking at the notes, he then returned those hearing aids, tried a pair of Resound hearing aids, and then went back to the Siemens hearing aids, and that's what he used before he got his new set, which is what I saw him shortly afterwards. One thing I want to mention, and you'll see this with some of these case studies, if you don't do real ear measurements, especially with this patient that we're going to see, your return rate is going to be way higher, okay? So take a look at this guy's hearing loss. It's normal to about 1500 hertz, and then it drops off very steeply after that, faster on the left side than on the right side, down to a severe hearing loss. This is sensory neural hearing loss. So here's a patient who, this is a really hard loss to fit. Any experienced clinicians are going to know that this is sort of tricky. It's easier to fit on the left side where there's more hearing loss than on the right side. He was refit with newer Signia hearing instruments with like a sort of closed sleeve on them to get rid of any sort of feedback, okay? And he was fit by not the clinician that I was filling in for, but another clinician in the office who was a new clinician. And because of time constraints, and he was kind of a complex client, I think there were some memory issues there, she didn't do real ear at the first fitting. And then, of course, what happens at the follow-up, there's no time to do it either, because then there's going to be issues. And so, long story short, I got a call to see this patient because they were having a hard time. And he specifically felt like his new right hearing aid really wasn't doing the trick for him, wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing. So naturally, step number one, run some real ear. And so that's what we did. And here's the speech map. So if you look at the curves, the first thing you'll notice is the left ear is not so bad. It's fairly close to target. It's, reasonable improvement in audibility. We made some small changes with the pink curves, the second curves down, but we only saw like a 1 point increase in audibility. No big deal, just little nitpicky stuff, maybe get them a little bit closer to target. But if you look at the right side, okay, first of all, go down to the very, very bottom. His unaided SII is super high, so 73. When you've got something with an SII that high, it's hard for them to see benefit with the hearing instruments sometimes. And the really interesting thing is, and the important thing is, that when we did a run with the hearing aids in with these sort of non-vented domes to try and get rid of feedback, which is what he was fit with, the aided SII is actually 72, which is 1 point lower, of course, than the unaided. So what does that mean? It means that his very expensive, brand new right hearing aid was acting as an earplug, which is exactly what he thought it was doing. He didn't feel like it was doing what it was supposed to be doing. So get into the software, boost. You can see that on the pink curve there, we have him, much closer to target. And importantly, we're seeing a 9 point improvement over his aided before. Okay, so that's a huge difference, especially that's nearly a double-digit difference. And with a hearing loss like this, that's kind of exactly where we'd expect him to be, exactly where we'd hope him to be. So the milder the hearing loss, the more normal hearing that's involved in the fitting, the harder you need to work to make sure that patient's going to see a difference. And the more important it is to actually run the real ear measurements, okay? Because when you have a more significant loss, there's almost always going to be a nice improvement in the audibility, even just on a best fit. You still really got to run real ear, but even more importantly, when it's a milder loss, a steeply sloping loss, you got to use it. Otherwise, you'll be in a position like this where you just sold someone a very expensive earplug. Don't do it. Run real ear.